You're
having
not
a
gonna
little
notice.
bit, having a little bit's okay.
I
And
love the sky in that picture.
Yeah.
if you're cross country skiing, then you're producing enough heat that it's not really an issue. But you have to be doing something active like that, or you will be cold.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I always
the
do
amount
cross
of wind
country
makes a
skiing in
huge
northern
difference.
Minnesota over
Oh
the
yeah.
New Year.
Oh yeah. I put up a second picture where you can almost see the sun.
Great. As much as I love the conversation about snow, I think we'll turn it over to Zoe. First off, I just want to say thanks for everyone bearing with us with the groups. We're very happy with the groups that we were able to come up with all your input and everything. Let us know if something feels off. There's a few people that we're still like trying to touch base with who may be no shows or something. We're not sure. But or potential yeah, I don't know, but we'll be in touch if like there's like a name in your group and you're like, I've never seen this person at all, like we'll get you in touch with them if they're still going to be a part
Yeah,
of it.
we likely have at least a tiny bit of information.
Yeah. But yeah, otherwise we'll put more information for Sunday where we'll do more group stuff and work towards proposals for projects. But today we have Zoe. So I'll turn it over to you, Zoe.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so is there anybody, I'm just trying to look, is there anybody here that wasn't here on Tuesday with me?
I couldn't make Tuesday.
That's right, Laura. Do you want to just, we took a moment on Tuesday just to make sure we all like put our voices in the space, said how we might introduce ourselves and a community or several communities that we consider ourselves a part of. I know everybody here knows you and I've met you before, but just so that you've also put your voice into our space.
Okay. Do you want me to do that like right now or like think about it for a moment or?
I don't want to put you on the spot, so do you want me to make space for it in a few minutes or?
Sure.
Okay, absolutely. So is there anybody else that wasn't here Tuesday? Okay, great. Okay. So what I want to do today is take the framework that we thought about on Tuesday of, culture work and collective care, and the ethics of those, and specifically start to think about how that might work within the collaborations that you're going to be embarking on now in Z Festival. So we're going to be focusing on basically two things. How do we create relevant community-oriented work without causing harm is going to be sort of our first question as a group. And then the second is going to be more about collaboration. So how do we engage in ethical and mutually rewarding and transformative collaboration, and thinking about how we might describe the culture of these collaboratives, of these communities. So for instance, with culture of a community, if I asked you to say words that would describe the culture of the Z Festival community, what types of words would come to mind? Being on the fringes of the community, but not, necessarily as embedded as all of you have been. I get the sense of a lot of warmth. That's a word that comes to my mind very quickly. So what are other words you might put forth?
I spaced out, but this is a question about the Z-Fest community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So words you might use to describe the culture of this Z Festival, the larger Z Festival community.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
I think welcoming is a really good one. Everyone's very supportive. Lots of positivity as to like all the gigantic diversity of projects and styles that we have. And I appreciate that a lot.
That's all great. Thank you.
I'd say patient. Everyone is, how do you say, I've never seen anyone try to like jump on anybody for anything they've said in a Z-Festival context. Everyone, sits back and listens to whatever people have to say, and comes to some kind of mutual understanding.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, going off of patience, a thing that I've really admired about this community that I haven't picked up on quite as much in like other music or art communities is people have a very wide variety of knowledge that they're eager to share with one another and are at the same time very patient and understanding if some people don't have the same knowledge base as other people. Like it seems like there isn't any kind of competition to conform to one particular knowledge base, and instead an eagerness to share what knowledge bases people do have and learn from other people's. I don't know how to encapsulate that into 1 or 2 words. I was looking for it, but I couldn't.
That was great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I guess one thing that has come up is diverse. We all come from very very different places. Variety of time zones even at the moment as yeah. But I mean everyone kind of there's so many different types of knowledge, which is really great. Just people have different backgrounds, different experience. You were asking earlier if I could try and say something about the communities I'm in. So, I mean, I've been in the States for a while, so I have some communities near Boston that I'm a part of. I have people I know in Finland. I'm in person here in London. So I guess right now I'm sort of largely professionally rooted here, although I have things going on elsewhere, so it's an interesting existence of living between several different places.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Laura. Any words that you feel need to be spoken about this culture that haven't been yet?
I have one. I'm fairly new here since I wasn't here in the summer festival, and I've really appreciated the level of thoughtfulness here, where concepts are really thoughtfully explored, and there's just this culture of wanting to learn from each other that I really appreciate.
Thank you very much. Great. So when we split up into groups here in a moment, one of the things that I'll be asking you to think about within these micro communities that we're now creating, these collaborative communities, about the culture that will come out within that community. And I know that it's like your first time getting together as this specific cohort that you'll be working with. But starting to think about, what kind of community you might want to create or what kind of culture you might want to create together. And then we're also going to be thinking, like I said, about the ethics and the mutuality of collaboration and how that works and how we can be more intentional. Everything about art right now, as you've heard from me, this summer and on Tuesday, pushes us and reinforces the ego and the self. And then if you're in the States like I am, right, our entire political system is built on rugged individualism, right? That's what we're told to hold up and to aspire to. And it's only just in the last 15, 20 years that we've started to see more scholarship specifically looking into, within the arts, the values of collaboration and how collaboration operates, and actually starting to analyze types of collaboration and things like that. So I want to just briefly talk about 2 examples of collaboration and start to think about the ethics. And we talked a lot on Tuesday about holding 2 seemingly in conflict or 2 seemingly opposing ideas at the same time, and how important that is to this type of work, and showing you kind of how that operates. And so I want to start with an example of my own work, because of course I can give the most informed thoughts on this work. So some of you I know, have come across my Syrinx project before. So the Syrinx project is a multidisciplinary commissioning series for solo flute. And it was spurred out of, in my undergrad, when I was learning Debussy's flute solo Syrinx, which everybody that goes through any kind of traditional Western classical music education learns at some point. And so when I was studying this piece, I was being a good undergrad student and went and read about the story behind it, and it was based on the mythology of Pan and Syrinx. And the TLDR, if you don't know that, is, Pan loved Syrinx. Pan wanted to be with Syrinx. Syrinx did not feel the same way. Pan chases Syrinx. Syrinx runs away. Syrinx reaches the edge of a river, realizes she can run no further. It is Julian. And so when she realizes she can run no further, she begs the gods for salvation. The gods decide to deliver in the form of turning her into the reeds by the river. Pan reaches the same river's edge, realizes he will never be reunited with Syrinx, and plucks up those reeds to fashion himself an instrument that we today call the reed pipes or the pan flute. And so at the end of this Debussy song, you hear this descending whole tone scale, and that's how it ends, meant to evoke Pan standing heartbroken on the edge of this river, playing this instrument that, of course, we know is the now literally disembodied and objectified Syrinx. Reading that as like a young woman in the 21st century is an experience, right? And there was a lot that resonated with me in that story. And we were pre-Me Too, but those conversations were percolating. They were happening. I was at Oberlin, so they were super happening. So I decided that I wanted to put the story back in to this performance of the Debussy. And originally, Debussy had written this as incidental music meant to have choreography, meant to be played off stage while there was choreography. But for decades, it has not been performed that way. It's been performed as a concert piece. So I thought, well, I have a dance background, and so I thought, well, what if I do the choreography and dancing while also playing the flute music? And then I also wanted to tell just enough of the story that I was centering Syrinx instead of Pan. Obviously, the title of the piece is Syrinx, but the way that the piece has often been told centers Pan and shows Pan as some kind of protagonist in this story. And so I also wrote some original poetry that is interspersed through the performance. And so I performed it this way on my junior recital with the dancing, the playing of the music, and the recitation of this original poetry interspersed throughout to make it more clear that I wanted to position Syrinx as the lamentable character in this, to center her, to show like how strong she was and how unfortunate of an ending it was. And something clicked for me in this performance between just how much I was able to relate to this character. So I expanded it into a full commissioning series, and today there's 4 parts, so there's 3 new parts with original music, working with one-on-one with a composer. Part 2 was written by Theo Chandler, Part 3 was written by John Burnett, and Part 4 was written by Sato Matsui. And worked with each of them. They wrote me original solo flute music. I continued to add different types of choreography. Not all of it is as traditional dancey as the Syrinx. For instance, some of it is more acting based, some of it is more mime based, and adding different sorts of language or different sorts of sound effects to each part to represent the characters. Part 2 is based on the character of Canis. Part 3 is based on Pandora, and Part 4 is based on Athena. And each one is related to some aspect of contemporary feminism or the conversations today around feminism. So when I say that I look back on this project, which, I only premiered Part 4 about a year ago, so it's been growing over many, many years. It's now a 10-year-old project. There's so many characters that need a chapter. But so I'm sitting here looking back on 10 years of work, and I can hold multiple truths at the same time. For instance, I can attest that the project is definitely emotionally provocative, and it's definitely good music. Like, these composers have all done an incredible job. I'm really just proud of the art by itself in a vacuum. I'm proud of the effect that it has on people to see these stories told in this way. From an ethical standpoint, it's definitely a story that I have a right to tell. It's my own story. It's also one that I find it cathartic to tell, because I'm not in the business of selling my trauma or traumatizing myself for other people's entertainment and consumption. But it is cathartic for me to tell the stories that I'm telling in this project. It also takes a work that, in my interpretation, the Syrinx has been misappropriated and miscontextualized, and it puts it back into the context that it was originally meant to be in. I like that it's taken 10 years to put together, and that you see my growth throughout the process of even how the pieces change over time. So these are all things that I can hold, but I can hold alongside that the fact that there's a lot of womanhood that I haven't represented in this story. I'm representing white women from a Western line of mythology. Also, 3 of the 4 composers in these 4 parts are male identifying. And that's because of who I knew and where I was at in my process. But now, I sit with that. And also, I ask myself the question all the time, well, so I'm really proud that this provokes people emotionally, but what do they do with that emotion after they've seen this? What responsibility do I have to direct that motion? What responsibility do I have to actually spur action and spur investment and spur engagement beyond just initiating people's emotions? So these are things that I'm sitting with this project, and saying I don't believe that a project is a success or a failure. It's a process, and we're going to hold both of these at the same time. And that's what I want to encourage all of you to do as you're exploring these questions in your projects as well. And then I want to just put into the space very briefly another example. I don't know how many of you may have heard of the Emerge Music Festival. It's happened twice, in 2018 and in 2019. It takes place in Las Vegas. And it's really worth looking up, but I just want to share, when we think about culture, how they define themselves. So if you ask what is Emerge on their website, it says, conceptually, Emerge is the intersection of social justice, art, and music. In practice, Emerge is a community rooted in an annual gathering where inspired changemakers are informed and entertained through programming that moves them closer to meaning or involvement. The constructive conversations that begin at Emerge then permeate, grow, and evolve within the community for the rest of the year. So for instance, in 2019, they had 4 themes that they were exploring as a festival. One was protest, self, brave, and sex. And so they bring in artists who are already doing sort of social justice activism within these areas, and they bring in activists as well, and pair them together. So they create narratives throughout the day that each artist is a part of telling the narrative. So for instance, last year, in addition to having, Andrew Bird there performing, they had David Sogg talking about gun violence in schools. And so it's this just really, really interesting intersection. And what I find so fascinating is that they define themselves above anything else as a community. And they're really explicitly invested in, how do we effect change beyond the bounds of this 2-day or 3-day event in Las Vegas. They're also incredibly intentional about why they're in Las Vegas. And if you look on their website, you can see this process, this active process of holding multiple truths. Holding the fact that Las Vegas is historically very diverse and has a lot of important populations that need to be represented at an event like Emerge, but also the things that have happened to Las Vegas that have made it a very difficult and potentially problematic place to hold this event. And so I'll include some links to their site and their work in the resource guide that I have for you all because I think that the way that they describe is such a transparent and beautiful way of holding these multiple truths, and holding space for all of it, and not trying to surmise into we are a complete success or we completely failed at this, which we are so incentivized to do with our work. So we're going to break up into groups here in a moment. And here are the things that I want you to think about as a group. If you had a chance to think about a culture work statement, doesn't have to be an arrival, but whatever thoughts were prompted by putting that together, whatever sort of considerations or questions you had, I want you to start by kind of sharing that with each other. Even if it's, well, I just got stuck even trying to begin because X, Y, and Z. And allow that share to, I'll paste this into the chat here in a moment, and then you can all take the questions with you into your groups. But I want you to allow that share to prompt a discussion around who you are and what you do, and consider how that relates to our current context. So you're all creating art specifically at the end of 2020. There's a lot going on all over the world in 2020, and there's probably a lot going on an individual, personal, and community level with each of you as well, that's driving what your current context is. And so I want you to, after you're thinking large term, large scale about who it is and what I do, bring it back to the context, bring it back down to the ground, bring it back to how that relates to right now and the art that you think you want to be putting into the world specifically right now. And then as a group, take that and start to identify areas of commonality, things that resonated, among multiple, maybe all the members in your group, as well as areas of potential, and I use this phrasing very, very intentionally, mutual appropriation or expansion. So we could have a whole hour-long discussion about the term mutual appropriation, but I'm going to put it into the space as relevant to collaboration. So finding the things that you have in common and the things that might challenge members of the group might include considering your identity and your lived experiences. It might include your vision and your values, and it might include your passions and aptitudes. And then I want you to share with each other what you hope will be the impact of your collaborative work. And in our last few minutes, I'm going to be coming around to the groups and chatting with everybody. And then in our last few minutes, we'll come back together as a group for about 10 minutes. And I want you to be prepared, somebody in your group or some buddies in your group, be prepared to share with the group in a few sentences the culture of your micro community, your new collaborative community. So let me just copy and paste these questions here into the chat before we break into groups, because I know the chat across groups gets weird. Yep, that's spaced out really weird, but there it is. If you want to maybe copy and grab that for yourself. And then, Shoshana, are you putting them into groups? Thank you.
Yeah,
and then I'll come around and check in with each group and chat with each of you.
All right, I'm going to open them up. They should be already, in your rooms.
Thank you.
And when are we coming back?
We'll come back at 5:50.
Bye, everybody.
Zoe, I was wondering if you wanted me and Peter to be doing any of that also, or do you want us to?
That's up to you. You guys are welcome to pop into groups and chat with people. I'm going to give them like 2 minutes before I jump in, because I know it can be awkward when like the person comes in and you haven't even like said hello yet. So I'll give them 2 minutes and then I'll start hopping around.
Can you pause a live stream?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It should be on the record, or you can definitely pause it on the YouTube end, maybe not in the Zoom thing.
I don't believe you. I thought you could, but I don't know if you can anymore. Like I can end stream.
Like, we could just end the stream too. They're coming back at 5:50. Like, there'll be a little wrap up, but
Yeah. Goodbye, YouTube.